Rise, Guardians of Dominion. Zeus here, and this event may be hiding more than a new hero. I saw two signals that could point to a serious shift inside Hero Wars, and if they are real, players who ignore them will be late to what comes next. Watch this carefully. Now I want to touch one more angle from this event, because in my opinion this event may have shown us two possible clues about the future of Hero Wars. I want to be careful here from the start. This is not official information, and I am not saying any of this is confirmed. This is only my own reading of what we saw, what kind of mechanics appeared, and how this event felt compared to a normal event. The first clue, and for me the more important one, is the talisman mechanic. Because the moment I saw talismans appear in these fights, that immediately felt like something bigger than a random event decoration. Usually when a mechanic shows up for the first time in an event, especially in a way that changes how battles feel, I think it is worth paying attention. And that is exactly why this stood out to me so much. What makes this more interesting, is that talismans already exist in Hero Wars Alliance, the mobile version of the game. So the idea itself is not foreign to Hero Wars. But the version we saw here did not feel like the same thing. In Alliance, talismans are much more connected to hero stats. They are another way to strengthen a hero, almost like adding more layers of power in one place. They improve the hero, but the concept is still mostly built around raw stats and progression. Here, what we saw felt different. These talismans did not look like they were only there to make heroes stronger in a simple way. They looked like they had the potential to influence behavior in battle, and that is a much bigger idea. The moment you move from pure stat growth into mechanics that can affect how heroes act, the battle becomes more dynamic, more unpredictable, and much more interesting, from a strategy perspective. And that is why I do not see this as a small detail. Because if Hero Wars ever introduces a system like this permanently, it would not just add more numbers. It could add another layer of gameplay. It could create new interactions between heroes. It could change which lineups feel strong. It could create situations where players are not only upgrading heroes, but also shaping how those heroes function inside a battle. That is a much bigger shift than just adding another source of stats. At the same time, that kind of change would not be small for the game. It could bring more depth, more variety, and more creative team building. But it could also bring more imbalance, more unpredictability, and another layer of progression that players would need to understand and manage. So when I look at what we saw in this event, I do not just see a fun temporary mechanic. I see something that has the potential to become a real future system. Of course, I want to repeat this again so nobody misunderstands me. I am not saying talismans are confirmed for Hero Wars. I am saying this event may have been testing the waters. It may have been a way to see how players react to this kind of mechanic in battle. And if the reaction was good, if the mechanic felt engaging, and if it opened the door to more interesting fights, then I do think there is a real chance that sooner or later we could see talismans, or something very close to them, enter the game in a larger way. And honestly, if that happens, it could change a lot. Because once you give players tools that influence behavior and not just stats, battles stop feeling completely predictable. That can be exciting. It can make the game richer. But it can also turn the battlefield into something much harder to control. So this is one of those things that could be very powerful in both directions. Now the second clue is not about old hero events having Archdemon fights, because they did not. That is not the point. The point is how this event used the Archdemon fight and what kind of player engagement it created. And that part, in my opinion, was very important. This time players were much more involved with the Archdemon fight than what we usually see in event content. Players were testing teams, comparing results, checking buff levels, asking why one setup works and another one fails, and trying to understand the mechanics behind the damage instead of just doing the fight and moving on. That changes the whole feeling of the event. Instead of being just another activity that players finish and forget, the Archdemon fight became something people were actually discussing and working on. It created competition. It created curiosity. It created trial and error. And most importantly, it kept players engaged longer, because there was still something to figure out. There was still something to optimize. There was still a reason to come back and test again. That kind of engagement matters a lot. Because from a developer perspective, an event becomes much stronger when players are not only collecting rewards, but actively interacting with the mechanics. The moment players start experimenting, comparing, and talking, the event becomes more alive. It creates more value than a passive event where everybody just follows the same path and finishes with no real challenge. And that is why I think this may also be a clue. Not that this exact format will return in the exact same way, but that the developers may have seen how effective it can be when an event battle creates real experimentation. It gives the community something to solve. It gives creators something to analyze. It gives competitive players something to chase. And all of that helps the event stay relevant for longer. So when I connect these two things together, the event starts looking much more interesting to me. On one side, we saw talismans used in a way that may be hinting at a future battle mechanic. On the other side, we saw an event structure that pushed players to test, compare, and optimize instead of just following a routine. Both of those things point toward a more active and more experimental direction. That is why I do not look at this event as just another hero release event. I think there is a chance it was also being used as a testing ground. Maybe not for everything. Maybe not in a final form. But at least as a place where the developers could see how players react when you introduce a more dynamic mechanic like talismans and a more engaging challenge like this version of the Archdemon fight. And if that reading is correct, then the future could become much more interesting. We may see more event battles that demand real testing. We may see more mechanics that affect how heroes behave. And we may see hero wars slowly moving towards systems that create more variety inside battles, not just bigger numbers on the screen. Again, this is speculation. I want to stay honest about that. But good speculation is not random guessing. Good speculation starts when an event shows signs that something different is being tried. And for me, this event showed exactly that. It felt different. It felt more experimental. And it felt like it was doing more than simply introducing a new hero. So if I had to summarize my own opinion, I would say this. The strongest clue from this event is the talisman mechanic, because that feels like the kind of system that could eventually become part of hero wars in a bigger way. And the second clue is the way the Archdemon fight pulled players deeper into testing and optimization, because that kind of engagement is exactly the kind of thing developers like to build on. Maybe nothing comes from it. That is possible. Maybe this was only an event experiment that disappears and never returns. But I would not ignore it. Because sometimes the biggest future changes in hero wars do not arrive with an announcement first. Sometimes they show up quietly inside an event, and only later do players realize they were looking at an early signal. And that is why I think this event may have given us 2 early warnings about where the game could be going next. Not confirmed answers. Just clues. But sometimes clues are enough to tell you that the battlefield is already starting to change. So for me, this event was more than just a new hero release. It felt like a possible preview of where hero wars could be going next, and that is exactly why I think players should pay close attention to what happened here. But now I want to hear your opinion. Do you think this event was quietly teasing future talismans and more interactive battle systems, or do you think this was only a one-time experiment? Write your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this kind of deeper Hero Wars analysis, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, so you do not miss the next video. Salute and friendship.